All right, there you are. All right, I think we can resume the board meeting. Good afternoon. Let's see, we are on number 8, which is the discussion and possible action on Business and Professional Code, Section 4800 regarding board composition. And I'm going to turn it over to Jessica to present this report. We had asked her for some information to bring back to us at this meeting.
Yes, so as you can recall, members, this was a request from stakeholders, and a board member had requested that the board look at this item as well to see whether or not the board should request a legislative proposal to add another RVT member to the board. And there was discussion of whether to put this to the MDC, and there was a request to keep it at the board level. And so this is to help with that discussion for you guys. I provided some background for comparison of what other healing arts boards are comprised of. I gathered the license type and data information from the last published DCA annual report. And on there I provided the breakdown of license types, license population, and then the types of board compositions that you'll see. So I thought that information would be helpful for the discussion, but this is really up to the board to decide if they do think that it's appropriate to add another RVT member onto the board and where to go from here. So with that, I'll turn it over to the board.
Thank you. And thank you. This was quite interesting to see this, and especially to see the licensee populations, et cetera. Thank you, staff, for putting it together. Are there any members that would have any questions or want to discuss this? We had talked about the board. We had talked about one possibility of turning this to MDC to further gather information on, and or having just a general discussion ourselves. So that's where we are today with the information that Jessica has provided us. Yeah, Jennifer?
Yeah, I'm happy having a general discussion on this, and I'd really like to hear the opinions of the other board members. But one thing I did want to point out as the RVT member is that I've heard other organizations, in their debriefing of our board meeting say that I stated that I think there should be another RVT member because there's a lack of representation when I'm not able to make a meeting. And that's not entirely accurate. Even when I am present, there's a lack of representation other than just myself. We have a very diverse population of veterinarians, some large animal, some small animal. With me, it's just me. And I think I'm doing the best I can, but it's really a good idea to have diversity in backgrounds and opinions. We all know that our individual perception is shaped by our experience, and we've seen that in some of our discussions in the board. In one situation, there was a board member who was just adamant in their stance on a certain issue, and no matter what I said, I couldn't change their mind. And I think it's just because our perception is limited by what we experience, and mine is the only RVT voice on this board. So even though I do have a very diverse background, it's been 20 years since I've worked in specialty medicine. It's been 15 years since I've been in day practice. I mean, it's been a few years now since I've been in shelter medicine. So I think having another member, yes, it does mean that there would be representation if I were not able to be here, but also a more broad perspective than just mine. And also, just gonna throw that in there, it's the workload is really, really heavy for me. Every time there's an RVT issue, I'm on that subcommittee. I also serve on the MDC. So these meetings are 3 days for me no matter what, plus the additional work that goes into everything. I did actually have to resign from my AAVSB subcommittee because I just don't have the time to commit. So I think having another RVT member would help spread that load a little bit, but I am interested to hear what the rest of the board feels. The one thing that I really got, and I thank Jessica and the staff for all of the research in this memo, Cliff's Notes version of the other boards, is how small our board is in comparison to comparable boards like the board of the medical board and the board of registered nursing. Is we're a lot smaller than I had realized. So I'd really like to hear some other opinions.
Dr. Bradbury.
I was trying to wait for other people because I'm always have my hand up, but I heard you, Jennifer, when you had said that it's the workload, and it just seems to me that it is an untenable amount of work for one individual. And I really like the idea of adding a second RVT. My concern when looking at the other boards is, that it would really tilt our licensee to public members even greater, and I worry about that, which would mean potentially, not adding a second RVT, but instead considering additional members of the public in addition to another RVT, I guess, would be to balance the number of licensees to public members, because right now we're like 5 to 3, and and then if we had another, it would be 6 to 3, and I feel like most of the other boards were sort of a little bit more evenly spread. So that would just be my comment.
Thank you, Christina. Anyone else? That one, I will say that's the one thing I thought of too, because I think adding an RVT makes sense given the population and giving that point of view. I wondered about the public member too, and I was interested. Some of these boards, well, I have to go back. Some of the boards have fewer. I mean, a lot of them are fairly even on public to licensed, but some have fewer public members than I thought they should, given their entire board. It was interesting, sort of the disparity. I don't know, like the chiropractic examiners has 2 public and 5 licensees and things like that, which I was surprised. But it's something, we can always entertain a discussion of adding a public as well as another RVT.
I just wanted to share my opinion. I don't think it's not even why do we need to discuss it? I think that, when we talk about representation, as we all are agreeing, the profession is so diverse. And so the veterinarians cannot speak for the RVTs. They do have their own perspective on things. And so I think it's only right that they need to be represented, more with just one person sitting on the board.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Salcedo. Dr. Nolan. Oh, and I see Mark. Okay.
Good comment, Dr. Salcedo. I guess I was curious because it does look like they're all over the board as far as percentage of public members to actual licensed members. And does the DCA have any sort of guideline and maybe purpose behind the percentages? I know we are all supposed to be here as advocates for the consumer. I mean, even though we have expertise in, let's say, veterinary medicine or as an RVT or as a public member, we're bringing different perspectives, but we are all at the end of the day, really focused on advocacy for the consumer. I wondered if there was some guidelines from the DCA about this, because I also noticed the difference in public members versus licensees. And, it seems like that might be a conversation we should have if we add another licensee.
Jessica, do you want to answer that before we move on?
Yeah, so the board composition isn't set by DCA, it's set by the legislature, and oftentimes has a lot of collaboration with the industry, with the boards themselves. In my experience, when controversial issues happen, oftentimes that leads to either a change in board composition or more clarification in the board composition. I remember when I was at Board of Optometry, there was a pretty big controversial issue that happened with the governor's office involvement, and because we had differing license types as well, and one of the thoughts was, well, we're going to add another individual onto the board. That board it was a lot bigger than when you compare it to the licensed population, and ultimately decided that wasn't the best solution. But it doesn't seem to be really a rhyme or reason as far as the amount of board members compared to the population. It is really all over the place, and it evolves over time. I know that, just look at the Board of Pharmacy, for example. There was a controversial issue that we are semi-involved with when it comes to drug compounding. And I know that CVMA was very instrumental in getting a piece of legislation where it changed the composition to require that a pharmacy be a compounding pharmacist on the board. So it really depends on what's going on in the industry, where the stakeholders lie, where the board is, and then where the governor's office is, because they ultimately will be the appointing power.
Mm-hmm. And Jessica, based due to the lawsuit a few years ago, and the SCC investigated the whatever against the dental board, South Carolina, there hasn't been any kind of instruction from the legislature about public versus professional membership on these boards per se, has there?
So when that all happened, there was a huge, really a review of DCA and how the boards were formed. The Attorney General's office looked at that a lot and looked at the composition of boards and the involvement in public members. And they ultimately decided when it comes to how the DCA is set up, it wasn't necessarily an issue if there was a public minority on the board, because there was some analytics into looking at what is a controlling member, and you could have licensees who, even if you had a licensees who were in the minority, they could still kind of control the conversation, and that's not necessarily indicative of what the true problem was when it comes to what happened with the dental board in North Carolina, sorry. That really wasn't the controlling factor. I know that there's a lot that are, there's discussions that have been had for several years now of moving boards to a public majority. But as you can see, that's just still not the case when it comes to most of the boards in DCA.
Okay, thank you. Diana.
I just wanted to express my support of adding the RVT. I think that it's important to add diversity, and then I appreciate the conversation we're having in regards to public members, but I just wanted to voice my support that I think it is important to have an additional RVT.
Sir?
I have a question that I don't know if Jessica or Tara would be able to answer, but hypothetically, if we did choose to add another member, what would that do to our finances for the board? I know we've had quite a bit of cost savings with the lack of travel and potentially going back into, traveling in person. How would that impact our budget?
So just a quick clarification, this isn't something the board can just choose to do. We can request a legislative proposal, and then it goes through the normal process for legislation. But it would obviously increase with every board member that's added. That's going to be additional per diems that we incur, and then just additional people to participate in meetings and to collaborate with. But I wouldn't see too big of an impact to our fund if we did that.
Just bring them through this way. You can bring them through. It's fine.
You're not muted, Kathy.
Oh, whoops.
Yeah, are they wolfhounds that are coming through?
Yeah,
Or what
there's
are...
a wolfhound coming through. Sorry. Going to physical therapy, by the way. Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
I'm in favor of adding an RVT to the board, if for no other reason than to give Jennifer less committees that she has to be on, because the RVT is expected to go to the MDC meeting and the 2 days of VMB meeting, so that's a lot. it'll finally give us an odd number instead of an even number. So it'll be easier to make decisions, especially on those split decisions. We don't have a vice president to break the. We have a vice president, but it doesn't work that way. The one thing when I looked at the composition of the other boards, there wasn't any correlation between the number of licensees to the number of board members, but there was a consistent professional majority, and I'm in support of that. I think it's the one time, in regards to the North Carolina case, I was in agreement with Justice Clarence Thomas when he says that he wants neurosurgeons to do neurosurgery. So I believe in a professional majority. The only question I had that was thinking a little outside of the box, are all the board members of all the boards in DCA appointed by either the governor's office or the members of the legislature? Because I know that North Carolina case, there was actually board members that were appointed by professional associations. So is that a requirement of DCA? They all have to be appointed by government?
So again, this isn't a requirement for DCA, it's in statute, which is set by the legislature. But that, you're right, that was another one of the conclusions from the Attorney General's office when they compared DCA structure to what happened in North Carolina. And ultimately, that's why they weren't too concerned about the structure of DCA, because they're appointed by either the governor, and then the Senate and Assembly both get one. For us, I'm not sure about appointees for each of the members, but I do know that it's how many the Senate and Assembly get, but those are the three appointing powers. With some of the board members, the governor appointees also have to be confirmed by the Senate. But it's going to be those three. There's no healing arts boards or any boards within DCA where the association or the profession appoints the members. They're all the governor, the Senate, and Assembly.
So our current RVT board member is appointed by the governor, right?
Correct.
So if we had a second RVT member, would that be appointed by the legislature, or would it still be the governor?
Likely by the governor. The Senate and Assembly typically appoint the public members.
Okay. And once it goes into legislature, the whole process, anything goes at that point, right? They can turn into something.
Right. Right. And so if the board does want to move forward with asking for this, we can ask for it to be included in the omnibus bill. And that's up to them whether or not they want to put it into an omnibus bill. If not, then we have to look for another author, and we're looking at a tight deadline to get any kind of legislation right now. But you're right, once it becomes legislation, then anything can happen.
They could even ask for a public majority on the board if they want it. Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Nolan.
I especially considering the amount of public comment this morning, and I know that when I was appointed by the governor, I think there was some thought process to the fact that I had food animal and equine background, but maybe it's time to also consider looking at the composition of our licensees a little more closely, as we just mentioned the pharmacy board doing. And several of the other boards are very specific as well, as far as the background of the appointed licensee. And, for instance, shelter medicine is an example, food animal, large animal medicine, corporate practice. You could go on and on, but, I think that, is that something we should also be discussing? Is it time for us to try to be a little more specific as to what types of licensee, what background licensees have?
I do want to just clarify that I do know that's something that the governor's office does look at, and the agency as well, when they're involved in looking at potential appointments to the board. They do try to get a variety of practice settings represented on the board. So even if it's not in statute, I know that that is something that they try to consider and do.
Dr. Nunez, unless that's an old hand.
Dr. Nolan always comes up with the best points. And just to support her point of discussion there, if you look at these boards, like, for example, the Registered Nurses Board has 2 nurses that are in direct patient care, 1 nurse in advanced practice, 1 nurse in education administration, 1 nurse in administrative nurses services. So I wonder if we should even consider composition of our board being as specific, like equine, small animal, etc. Good point, Dr. Nolan.
Well, whoops. Okay, well, so we've gone sort of full circle to, I think seems like a consensus to add an RVT member makes a lot of sense. And I know we don't have a motion on the board. And I know whatever we want to do composition wise, we will have to have the staff work with the legislature on putting a bill in. Mark, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah,
I brought up originally about maybe adding another public member, but maybe we don't need that. But
I think what the other point that Dr. Nolan made is maybe we should wait until the survey comes back. That's going to give us a better idea of what the composition of our licensees is, and that can help us make it the best serving board that it could be. Is there time? Is there an urgency to get this done now, or would it be wise to wait for the survey that we just heard about?
I don't know, other than poor Jennifer's time and life. I mean, this discussion is a valuable discussion, and it's clear that looking at the board composition is something we want to do, starting with potentially adding an RVT member. Jessica, it also sounds like that data is not available probably from that survey for at least a year or two, but so it's a little bit farther out, waiting for that data to occur. And I think it's a complicated. I think adding an RVT is less complicated than adding if you take the 4 vet positions and specifying practices potentially with the legislature, but I don't know. I'm not an expert in that. And Jessica, I don't know when boards in prior boards have gone to the legislature, like you said, the optometry board did. Is it, I mean, I don't know how contentious a process it is to change the composition of a board.
It really depends. It depends on the stakeholders and the industry and how much they support it. If it's something that is widely supported, it's usually easier to get in. But if there's a lot of controversy surrounding it, then it takes a little longer. So it's just like any piece of legislation.
Well, does somebody want to make a motion, or Jennifer?
Sorry, I had one more comment. I had one more comment. I just wanted to clarify that this is definitely not about me specifically. Remember, this is my last year with the board. Theoretically, I have 2 meetings left, so there's nothing we're going to do in that time that's going to make an impact. But for the continuity, of the future of the board going forward, just like veterinarians and other support staff, RVTs are leaving the profession more quickly than they're coming into it. So initially, I was concerned there wouldn't be enough interest in this position, but we saw at our last meeting when there was an opening for an RVT on the MDC, that was the biggest pool of RVTs I've seen interested, and we had amazing candidates. If we see that kind of interest with the board, that's going to make such an impact. And again, there's nothing we're going to do during my term, and it's not about me specifically, but it is a very demanding position for anybody in any licensed position trying to take time off. So it's just for continuity going forward in the future of the board.
Good point, Jennifer. And I didn't mean to put it on you because I know you're not asking about this because of yourself. You're asking because of the broader need and the issues. So, Mark.
Jennifer and I are currently on our farewell tour right now. But waiting a year and a half in the grand scheme of things, how long all these things take, I'm going to sound a little bit conservative, but I think we should wait for the survey to get more information about what the best servant board would look like. But if Jennifer makes the motion, having said that, if Jennifer makes the motion, I will support it. But
can we hear public comment before we have a motion on the table?
Yeah, I don't see why not. Absolutely. And then we can go back to discussion again. So, moderator, would you like to open up public comment?
Thank you, Madam President. I've opened up the Q&A panel, and if any member of the public would like to make a comment on this topic, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, or you may simply raise your hand. We're displaying instructions, and we'll give you a moment. All right, we have Nancy Ehrlich that would like to make a comment. So Nancy, I'll let you know when you can unmute yourself. Okay, Nancy, you should be able to unmute yourself. And it looks like you're on. Yep.
Is it working now?
Yes.
Oh, good. I fixed my computer. I think it's pretty obvious that right now the proportion of veterinarians to RVTs on the board is out of whack. I did some numbers, and you know, there's about 3/4 of the licensee population. About 75% RVTs to veterinarians, 100% veterinarians. So one RVT on the board is just not representative of the population. And I think we don't need to wait for the survey to know that most RVTs, I would probably say upward of 80% of RVTs are in small animal practice. There are some in large animal practice, not many, and there are quite a few in working in shelters and that sort of thing. This is something that we should have been doing years ago, and I don't think we want to wait for a survey. Well, I'm not sure what the survey would tell us as far as RVTs is concerned. And as far as if you want to start designating the type of practice for veterinarians, that's something that can wait a year or 2 or 3, but not adding an RVT to the Veterinary Medical Board. I think we should take this opportunity that's presented right now and do it.
All right, this is the moderator. I see no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, back to the board discussion. Anybody want to provide a motion on this? Oh, Dr. Bradbury, I didn't see your hand. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was going to motion to ask the legislature to add an RVT to the board.
I will second.
4 seconds. Now for more discussion. Anyone? I see no hands. All right. Well, if we're ready to move to a vote on this.
Now that we have a motion, we have to go back to public comment, please.
Sorry, you're right. I apologize. Thank you. Back to public comment. I'll get this right.
Thank you, Madam President. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, or you may simply raise your hand. We're displaying instructions, and we'll give you a moment. All right, Anita Levy-Hudson would like to make a comment. So, Anita, you should be able to unmute yourself. Very.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. I just wanted to give support to Nancy's statement a moment ago and add that my concern with waiting for that survey to come out is that in that time, we will have so many RVTs potentially leave the field that would be helped by this action now. We know at these board meetings, sometimes things move so slowly, some of the changes, but some things move really quickly. And I think having that representation will help to ensure retention of some of the RVTs that are currently here. So it's a big deal. It would be very much appreciated. Thank you.
All right, and I see no further requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay.
Oops. All right, so back to discussion. And again, I think somebody mentioned it earlier, but as we know, obviously, going into the legislative arena, there's a few steps that we have to, and hurdles that have to happen to get something into legislation. And then once it's there, of course, it's open to discussion and other things. So hopefully, we don't know what the timetable is on something like this, if we do pass this motion, but it's something that we can, work towards getting done as soon as we can. Because I don't know, timing is tough on legislation, but I know that staff is very competent. Dr. Nunez.
I guess I have to clarify some points. I don't mean to imply that the survey is going to give us information that is going to add or distract from the fact that we need more RVT representation. But my concern is once this piece of legislation is put in, it's like a sausage factory. Who knows what goes in is not what's going to come out, and so there's going to be lots of interest groups, stakeholders that are going to want to chime in on the process. And the more information we have on the current state of veterinary medicine, the better we're going to be able to participate in that process to produce a good board. Traditionally, and sometimes it's been frustrating, but this board has done a lot of research before making a decision on what to do. And this particular issue was requested not to go through MDC, and the board members, I think, based on a chart that shows the composition of what other boards have, I don't think that's sufficient information. And I don't ever mean to come across as being non-supportive of our RVTs, because they're crucial. I do support another RVT member to be added, but it has to go through legislation, and that's going to turn into something big. And we have to be willing to participate in that process in the best way we can. That's why I just think we're going too fast.
Jennifer, sorry.
Just wanted to comment. I absolutely agree that we could get a finished product that's different than what we sent in. But I'm thinking back to the recruitment process when I applied for this position, and I really do have faith in our governor's office. They do their research, and they did interview the board staff to see what was needed. And I think my shelter medicine background was a big factor in the reason I was chosen for the board. I really do have faith in the governor's office. Knowing how long any kind of legislation, any kind of legislative proposals take, I am in favor of going forward with the request. And I don't know if it is impossible to make changes, to offer suggestions after, if we have more information once that survey comes back. But today, if we start the process for a legislative proposal request, it could still take years. So I'm sticking by my my second to Dr. Bradbury's motion.
So is this going to be like a piece of legislation that we have to find someone to carry it, or is it going to be put through another piece of legislation, or how would it work?
Jessica?
Yeah, so just like the telemedicine definitions that the board requested, I can request that it be put into an omnibus bill, but like I said, if it becomes controversial, that typically doesn't make it into an omnibus bill. So we can always make the request, but I believe the deadline to introduce legislation is this week. So to get an author, if it's not in the omnibus bill, I think it's going to be really challenging to do. But it's really the will of the board of what you guys want to do with this proposal. We'll do our best, but we can always try again next year as well, because this is the second year of a 2-year cycle, so it's a little harder too to get something in this late of the game.
All right, I thought I saw another hand up, but perhaps I did not.
No, it's me.
Oh, it is you, Christina. Sorry, your little hand's up there. Sorry.
That's okay. You know, I understand Mark's, Dr. Nunez's concerns about moving too fast. I was a little confused about what data we were waiting for. I thought that if we were waiting for data, the intention was whether we wanted to ask for sort of bigger changes to the board composition in terms of specifics for veterinarians and less related to the RVT issue. Is that correct? I think that was the intention of waiting so that we could kind of put it all together. And if that's the case, I think we can separate those two things out. And I agree that things take so long that by the time we see this, going through, it's probably going to be a couple years if we're successful. And I do wonder what else what other information we would need to decide that we needed another RVT when we kind of have all of the information on the table about the burdens to one RVT, the lack of diversity in terms of their ideas and opinions, and experiences with just having one individual representing the whole RVT profession on the board. So I don't know what waiting would, what more information could be provided to help us decide on that specific issue. So that's.
All right, any other discussion? Because we do have the motion, the second on the floor right now to vote on. But I want to make sure nobody else has any points or thoughts. All right, well, Jessica, do you want to take, maybe we should just restate quickly the motion since it's been a little bit.
The motion that I have from Dr. Bradbury and seconded from Ms. Laredo is to request the legislature add an RVT member to the board composition.
Perfect.
All right, Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Noland?
Yes.
Dr. Nunez?
No.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
Yes. Sorry, I said it too quickly and then unmuted myself.
Dr. Solacito?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, now moving into, now speaking of legislation, update and discussion and possible action on 21/2022 legislation. And as Jessica said, this is the second year of a 2-year term, and we have some holdover bills that Jessica is going to discuss.
Yeah, so just like last beginning of the year, we always list bills that have the potential to continue forward. So most of these bills are carryovers from the first year of the 2-year cycle, which was last year. And so I listed them on the off chance that there was more movement for the board to decide and discuss on. There hasn't been much movement on any of them, but before we get into the list of bills, I did want to bring agenda item 9A to the board's attention. There's some legislative proposals that we'd like you guys to consider to request in an omnibus bill, and they're non-substantive changes. For the first one, we have a statute that is no longer relevant as it refers to continuing education that was earned over 2 decades ago. So I think that just in the matter of cleanup, we can request that this be struck and updated. And then the second part is a concern that CARBDA had brought to our attention during one of our monthly meetings with them. They're concerned about the recent specialty language that we had put into our sunset bill that's now enacted. The concern is that it didn't account for the specialties that are provided by NAPTA. And so we are proposing some changes to that, and you'll see that in the materials. So we're just asking to add to section S for A3S that we add or National Association of Veterinary Technicians in America recognized veterinary specialty organizations. And so with that, if the board agrees with those 2 changes, then we request a motion to approve, to recommend to the California State Legislature the legislative proposal to repeal BPC section 4846.5, subdivision B5, and amend BPC section 4AA3, subdivision S, to add NAPTA recognized veterinary specialty organizations for inclusion in an omnibus bill this legislative session.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second. It's Dr. Bradbury.
Thank you. And do we need to go to public comment right now before we do the vote?
I think it would be cleaner just because this one really is a standalone item.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And I can get rid of that CE certificate from 20 years ago.
So moderator, could you open it? Thank you.
Thank you. So the Q&A panel is now available. If you'd like to make a comment on the motion, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and send it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We're displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, Nancy Ehrlich would like to make a comment. So Nancy, I'll let you know when you can unmute yourself. And Nancy, you should be able to unmute yourself. There you go.
I just wanted to thank you for your getting to this so quickly. I am a little embarrassed that I didn't notice this in the legislation in the first place, but it was brought to our attention by the specialty organizations that NAVTA is the one that awards specialties to RVTs, not the AVMA, and so this bill really does need to be fixed since it does, the language of the bill does cover RVTs, but it doesn't cover the organization that actually creates RVT specialties. So this is really important.
All right, this is the moderator and I see no further requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Any further discussion by the board on this motion? If not, I will turn it to Jessica for the roll call.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Noland?
Yes.
Dr. Nunez?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Dr. Solocito?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler?
Yes.
Motion carries. Okay, so for the remaining bills, there hasn't been much movement except for the addition of AB 1498. This bill was recently gutted and amended to apply to per diem. In the meeting materials, I talk about the purpose of the changes, and I had spoken with the author's office as well. And this was to help combat the inconsistencies of how per diem has been applied over boards. There are some boards who have been providing per diem. If there's a board member who is, say, involved in a conversation for maybe 15 minutes and they were requesting to get $100 per diem. There's also board members who are involved in a pretty cumbersome accumulation of 8 hours. And then there's some, like this board, who primarily just requests per diem for any board meetings or committee meetings. And so this was an attempt for the author's office to help with the clarification of what per diem means. I don't know if the board wants to weigh in at this point, because I know that there's some discussions already about some amendments, but I do think that if the purpose was to become consistent with what per diem truly means, I think it's best if the legislature just defines what it is rather than provide multiple options that requires the board then to do regulations in order to define it. That's just a comment from staff, but it's up to the board how you want to proceed with that bill. If you want to provide comments back, or if you would like to just watch it to see what happens and have a more substantive conversation in the next meeting. So with that, I didn't have any other updates with the other bills, except that the only thing that I've heard so far that is most likely coming back is the DCLAW bill, SB 585. I had some conversations with Senate B&P staff who had just wanted to know updates of where the board stood with it, and if we are willing, if there's anything that we would be willing to support the bill. But there hasn't been any changes to my knowledge of that bill where it stands right now. So with that, I'll turn it over to the board to see if you want to discuss any of the pending legislation.
Thank you, Jessica. Just from my perspective, it's super early in legislative session, in my opinion, on a lot of these bills. Even in the per diem bill, there may be changes, and it sounds like there's still negotiation. So for me, it seems a little early to engage. We also don't know whether some of these bills are going to continue on or not. And we have plenty of time to see the bills in April. But that's my opinion. Dr. Nunez. You're muted.
I said that I have no life other than veterinary medicine, and I actually enjoy coming to these meetings. So I would be in favor of seeing what the legislature comes up with. However, I would be in favor of offering per diem to Jennifer for all the committees that she's been on. That's
Can
my
I
only
second
comment.
that?
You absolutely can.
Dr. Bradbury?
So this is more related to AB 384, and I know it isn't on the, we're not discussing it at the moment, but this has been going around for a long time. This is related to cannabis, and I just would like you guys to think about this a little bit more before the next meeting. If we're not going to be commenting on a stance yet, I'm fine with that, but I just want to ask how we are protecting consumers if we're not supportive of this, even without the research part put into it in the amendment, because there's no way we're going to get research without it being legal for veterinarians to prescribe these products, and people are using them all the time. And I think that we need to just come to terms with the fact that this is out there and veterinarians should be involved in the conversation and in being able to utilize it. There's a lot of data now, and I just would hope that you guys start to consider this and think about it and ask how we're protecting a consumer if we're not allowing veterinarians to be a part of these decisions that they're making now. So that's the only one I wanted to comment on. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else on the board right now? And then we can open it to public comment, and that would be on all these bills. Moderator, I'm sorry. Could you open the public comment?
Thank you. All right. The Q&A panel is now available. If any member of the public would like to comment on any of the bills listed for agenda item 9, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We will give you a moment to access the feature. All right, so we have, we have Grant Miller, and forgive me, I may have missed it from the last time, so I'll give him a chance, see if it's about any of these bills. So Grant, you're able to unmute yourself.
Thanks so much. It actually was from the last comment period, but I can actually carry it over into this one. I had an inquiry for Jessica regarding, and forgive me if this is somewhere else on the agenda, I had an inquiry regarding the telemedicine, telehealth terms that kind of got held over from the sunset review, whether or not you've had any luck on figuring out where those are going to end up in this year's legislative process. Thank you.
So just to update the members on the telemedicine request on this bill, I do have a meeting with the Senate BNP staff and Senate Republican caucus on Friday at 3:30. And joining me will be Dr. Sullivan and Christy Pulaski, the two people who were instrumental in coming up with those terms. So they're going to join me in that meeting. And we're going to request that it's in the omnibus bill. But again, that's not a guarantee, but I should know more on Friday.
All right, and Pamela Lopez is requesting comments. So Pamela, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Good afternoon, VMB members. I'm sorry that I'm not with you on camera. I don't seem to have the option to turn on my camera, which is fine. I would love to be able to see all of your faces and have you see mine, but I'm happy to speak via audio. Pam Lopez on behalf of the Pet Cannabis Coalition, and I wanted to speak to AB 384. AB 384 is a bill that will be reintroduced with a new bill number by Assemblymember Kalra in the next several weeks. And we will keep all of the members of the VMB apprised of our progress as we move that piece of legislation. But there will be new legislation on animal cannabis issues, and it will do two things. First, as you know, current law allows veterinarians to discuss cannabis with pet parents, but it does not allow them to recommend cannabis as a therapy for pet parents. The bill will allow veterinarians to recommend cannabis as a therapy for pet parents. It does not require them to have any other training, or nothing changes except that they can make that recommendation. One. And the second piece of the bill that we believe will be really important is that it will allow retail dispensaries to sell pet cannabis therapies with clear labels and instructions for pets. It is our understanding, based on market research data, that about 10,000 individual families throughout the state of California purchased cannabis as a therapy for their pets in 2020 before the product was taken off the shelves. So just by way of a little bit of history, when retail dispensaries became legal in the state of California, January 1, 2018, SB 64 and the subsequent laws, Malcursa, that enacted SB 64 were silent on the issue of pet cannabis. It was assumed at the time that SB 64 made pet cannabis legal. So for 2.5 years, from January 1st, 2018 through mid-year 2020, families and their pets had access to cannabis as a therapy for pets. And the medication, the therapy was clearly labeled. It had clear dosing instructions, just like any other therapy that you might purchase at either the pet store or at your vet's office in consultation with your veterinarian. In 2020, the regulating agency, the Department of Cannabis Control, came back and said, it was the Bureau of Cannabis Control at the time, came back and said, we're not sure if this is legal or not. And so the workaround is that we are going to require that any cannabis therapies have all labels and references to pets taken off of them. So the products are still widely available on the retail market, but now there is not
30
clear
seconds.
dosing or labeling instructions on those products. Getting labels and instructions back onto those products will be critically important for the safety of pets and their pet owners. I will also just add that the bill will be supported again by the Best Friends Animal Society. I've really appreciated the conversation today around access and herd medicine for shelter animals. And the Best Friends Animal Society is part of our coalition because they recognize how important cannabis is as a therapy for pets. I will finally just add that there is a great deal of research showing the value for pain, anxiety, inflammation, nausea, and seizures for cannabis-derived CBD with a small amount of THC. The two chemicals interact in a way that ultimately provides the best medicine for pets. So the thing that veterinarians most
And this is the moderator. The 3 minutes were up. That was the last public comment we had. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oops. All right. I think we don't have a motion, right, on this. We're, as far as I recall, we're watching these bills as right now. Is that where we were?
We don't need any additional motions, and we can move on to the next agenda item.
That's what I thought. Thank you so much. Okay, now we're on to a discussion of our proposed regulations. And Jeff Olgwin, I think, who replaced, and we'll know this during the administrative report tomorrow, Justin, recently, Eleanor staff is going to present this portion.
Thank you. And again, let me see if I can get this on. I have replaced Justin Sotelo in his 2 years of service to the vet med. I know that I worked with him in the past as well when he was previously with the California Architects Board. And just a little background on me is I have spent the last 10 years at the Architects Board. So under the umbrella of DCA, that's another sister agency per se. So to go on to our actual agenda item, I'm hoping you guys can see my screen. If you guys can see the item in the background, I appreciate that. But as far as agenda item 10A about the status of the pending regulations, I know Justin and Tara Welch and Karen Halbo have worked tirelessly in the last year to get a lot of these regulations, again, with you guys and your help as well, to get them pushed through the regulatory process, with most recently being the disciplinary guidelines and the drug compounding and the animal physical rehabilitation being the most recent ones that were approved. With the APR being approved on the 1st of this month, and the other two, drug compounding and disciplinary guidelines, going into effect on April 1st. Those being the most recent ones. We do have the uniform standards, which you guys will be discussing further in agenda item 10B. And you guys, I'll give you guys a chance to read through that. Hopefully it's big enough for you guys to see all that. If you need a little bigger, let me know. But again, we had some section 100s that were also done at the end of October and the beginning of November last year that got approved within about a week, which had to do with the RVT examination eligibility window and the euthanasia Asia training were done. I'll give you guys a chance to look over that real quick. Then I just want to show you guys some of the statuses that we have going on here. So again, this kind of shows you that the timelines of the items. First three right there, you can tell have gone through the full phases of being approved and going through their process. We still have about 11 more that we are currently working on to get through the process and that we have added to the rulemaking calendar to work on this year. You'll see more of those right around here, which I plan on working with our legal team as well to get these through the process. And with that, if you guys have any questions, I am relatively new, so I know I have about 3 weeks on the job as of the first, so thank you guys for allowing me to join the board.
Well, welcome. And I know Jessica will chime in too. Thank you very much. I was impressed that since our October meeting, 5 rulemaking packages have completed the rulemaking process and been approved by OAL. So that was kind of exciting to see. I know we have a lot more to go, but it sounds like you guys are working through them. Let me see if anyone has questions for you. No questions on the pending regs, guys? Doesn't look like it. Thank you, Jeff. Very nice.
That I'll turn it back over to Jessica.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go to agenda item 10B, and that's the uniform standards for substance abusing licensees. Members, this was much of the materials were provided during the October meeting. We had raised some recommended substantive changes to the uniform standards since the board originally approved them. The first substantive change that the board had that we were recommending that the board make is to add prohibited substance and biological fluid testing to the regulatory language. We did approve them in the uniform standards, but we think they should be in the regulatory language itself for clarity. The other substantive one that we're recommending is to make the uniform standards also apply to diversion. Right now, it applies to those on probation, but the FACC had also recommended stated for diversion as well, and so we're recommending that it also be included for those who are and it's now called the wellness program. So we're making those changes. We are recommending that the board make those changes. In addition, we're recommending the board make some non-substantive changes. We're recommending that we change the term licensee to individual so it can be applied to applicants as well. And then also changing gender gender references to gender neutral references. So we ask that we change that throughout, and then also add an authority and reference section and that's in page 5. So those are the recommendations that staff is recommending that we make to the rulemaking. With that, the regulation unit also identified some suggested changes to the language, and so I wanted to turn that over to a regulation unit attorney for them to go over the concerns that are further outlined in your memo. Karen?
I don't know if it's just me, but are we having hard trouble hearing Karen?
Yes.
I can understand her.
This is a moderator. She might need to call in for her audio.
Okay. A new director at the Office of
Moderator, would you mind displaying the screen so Karen knows how to call in for her audio, please? I think that she's having trouble with her bandwidth.
Thank you. Let me go ahead and grab the presenter role real quick. And then we'll go to that slide. Oops.
Karen, you may also want to try to deactivate your camera.
Apologies, I wrote down the wrong slide number for our audio. There we go. So Karen, if you want to change your audio to the call-in option, you just go to the top of your screen and select audio and video, and you can switch audio. And then once you select call-in, you just follow the prompts.
You know, Kathy, I don't think my meeting's had so many problems, so many technical problems.
Just my luck. Or Karen. Karen, we still can't really hear you if you're trying to talk.
She sounds like she's really trying.
This is the moderator. She has switched to her phone. She's muted right now. So to unmute yourself on the phone, it would be *6, I believe.
Better. Is that any better?
Yes.
Did we get there?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I wanted to explain that the legal advice that the board got back in 2019 when working on this initially was from a committee that drafted this language and proposed certain things. And there's been a change with our department, with the Office of Administrative Law and how they're reviewing things. And the regulations unit has found some language that might be questioned as unclear. And we wanted to just state these are these things that what we're seeing from reviewers might get questioned, but I'm understanding from Jessica that the board wants to move forward and doesn't want to deviate from the suggested language from the SACC uniform standards that were provided back in 2019. And so I just somewhat out of concern that the board doesn't say if the Office of Administrative Law says, well, this is unclear, you'll need to do a 15-day to fix this. It's not hard to fix these things, and it will not delay things too much. But we want you to know, it seems like what's happening with the Office of Administrative Law is they are being much more conservative in their reviews. And there is some back and forth among what is the appropriate trigger for the board for when a person is subject to the uniform standards. Right now, once somebody, let's say they have a drunk driving conviction from New Year's Eve, the conviction alone, the board is saying, means, boom, they are a substance abuser. They have to go through this process. And it could be a one-off. It could be they actually don't have a substance abuse problem and they have the burden to prove otherwise to the board. That could raise a constitutional issue, but we don't have any published opinions on that yet because you're removing their license and they have the burden to prove versus the board have the burden to prove. And I understand from Jessica, this board has discussed this a number of times. So, yeah, the board is the client and you get to make the call. So I said to Jessica, we'll just put in the changes that you feel the board is going to be comfortable with, and that after the people who have been in this process 5 years, Tara and Jessica, want to move forward with, and we'll just disclose these are possible. They may not happen, but if they do happen, I don't want the board to feel blindsided that I didn't tell you, and they're solvable. If by the time we file it with OAL, if they're being that careful, we can make a modification to text after the 45-day public comment period. So that, I hope you had the time to read the memo and kind of get a sense of that. Because then we have this fairly lengthy, but very specifically worded in a certain way, motion that we're asking the board to do so we can make the revisions and move forward and get this out to public comment period and try to get it promulgated.
Thank you, Karen. Turn it back to Jessica for a moment.
Yeah, just to clarify, members, the burden when it comes to any kind of enforcement action is on the board and clear and convincing evidence. So in the example that she provided, if for the one-time DUI on a Saturday night, that would be a pretty high burden for the board to prove that that incident was a danger to the public. And I don't see the board pursuing any disciplinary action and placing people on probation if it was a one-off, unless there were some more red flags that indicated that this person was a danger to the public. The whole idea of placing any kind of discipline on someone is to protect the public, and those are things that we weigh. And if we felt that they weren't a substance abusing licensee or didn't have an actual issue with substance abuse, then we wouldn't be pursuing disciplinary action. And so I know that that was just the purpose of an example, but I don't want that to scare the board to think that anyone who has a one-time DUI would end up with these uniform standards. Because when you look at our denial rate and our discipline when it comes to convictions is really low now when it relates to any kind of DUI or substance abuse issues. So I just don't want that example to make you guys think that that's something that would happen with this trigger. As the board knows, especially the board members who have been here long before me, the trigger specific language has been something that the board has discussed a lot with many different attorneys involved. And so I believe that this is a trigger that is common throughout DCA Healing Arts boards. And I would not recommend changing the trigger at this time.
Thank you, Jessica. I mean, I'll just start off on the discussion real quick. Just being on the board for these many years, we have been working on this for a long time, and I realized that we're actually probably late in getting these uniform standards finalized. And it seems to me there is the committee, SACC Uniform Standards committee gave language, and we're trying to adhere to that. What's frustrating to me personally is it just seems like the more people that review this, and I know they're all doing a good job, and they're attorneys and everything else, everybody's finding different little changes. And the more we continue this postponing it and tinkering with it, I just feel like what we have, and I think these changes that the staff is recommended to make right now to what we already have presented makes sense. The more we go down this line of, analyzing what multiple means versus whatever, I think we'll never finish this, and we're trying to make them uniform. We're trying to use what we were provided. And so anyway, that's my feeling about it. I appreciate the requested changes that the staff has provided us to accept, and that makes sense. But these other things that may be problems are I'm not sure that we should deal with them right now. So it's just confusing to us as a board over all these years of working on this. And Mark and I particularly worked on this. It's been 5 years or something now. But anyway, that's just what I had to say about it.
To paraphrase what Jessica said, and Jessica, hopefully I have this right. The regulatory unit is saying that our language is a bit too trigger happy, and that the triggers for considering a person a substance abuser is needs to be changed. But even if that person was considered a substance abuser, the board does have the authority to grant or deny licensure. Is that correct? Is that why we feel comfortable going through with these?
Yeah. Because as you know, there's a difference between substance use and substance abuse. And so it's something that the board considers when it comes to really any conviction that occurs. We have to look at that with the rehabilitation criteria and look at to see whether or not we feel this individual is safe for consumers to practice.
We have the authority if we do figure it's just a one-off to grant license free and clear without any disciplinary action.
Correct.
Okay. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Anyone else on this? As far as this is concerned, the staff's asking, there is an action requested here, if it is the mind of the board to do that, on the uniform standards.
Kathy, is the action requested? That's basically to respectfully decline to take the Ms. Halbo's recommendations and move forward with things, correct? The action requested here.
I believe it is it's written here on page 3, and it is, I believe, to accept some of these changes and then move the package forward with these changes only. And it's written on page 3. I can read.
I have it in front of me. I just want to make sure that
it's respectful. Yes.
Right. That it isn't that we're just sticking with it, but we're making those changes that Jessica talked about in the beginning. Is that just, Jessica, can you make sure, clarify for me?
Yeah, the motion that we provided is the motion that we're recommending.
Great. Then I would like to make a motion let's see here, to approve the attached proposed regulatory language to amend section 2006 and add the uniform standards for substance abusing licensees therein incorporated by reference, and add sections 2006.5, 2006.51, 2006.52, 2006.53, 2006.54, 2006.55, and 2006.56 to Article 1 of Division 20 of Title 16 of the CCR, and direct staff to take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking process, including noticing the proposed text for a 45-day comment period, and if there are no adverse comments received during that 45-day public comment period, delegate to the executive officer the authority to make any technical or non-substantive changes to the proposed regulations that may be required in completing the rulemaking file and adopt the proposed regulations.
Now, is there a second?
I will second that. Well done, Dr. Bradbury.
Second to that paragraph.
Yeah, I wanted to read it.
Oh, sorry, Mark. Although, any further discussion by the board before we open to public comment? All right, seeing no hands. Moderator, could you open it up to public comment, please?
Thank you. I'm opening up the Q&A panel. And if any member of the public would like to comment on the motion, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. Or you may simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, I'm seeing no raised hands or requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you. So now we have a motion on the floor, and if there's no further discussion, Jessica, would you call for the roll?
Dr. Bradbury,
Yes.
Ms. Laredo,
Yes.
Dr. Noland,
Aye.
Dr. Nunez,
Yes.
Ms. Prado,
Yes.
Dr. Solostito,
Yes.
Ms. Bowler.
Yes.
Motion carries. All right, so that brings us to agenda item 10C, and this is to initiate the discussion with the board and perhaps to delegate down to the MDC. Members in prior board meetings and a few of the CARPTA meetings that I've had with them, they've raised a request for the board to consider reevaluating the animal healthcare task for RVTs and what they're able to do independently from veterinarian supervision. Specifically, they'd like the board to consider to allow them to do essentially anything that an owner can do on their own, or what they can do as long as they're not paid for those services. So they specifically, I listed on page 2 of the memo, they want to be able to independently administer to animals outside of veterinary premises environment prescribed medications such as ST fluids, insulin injections, and oral medications without veterinarian supervision. And I did note that RVTs can provide those services right now as long as they're being performed free of charge. So with that, it's really up to the board if this is something that you would like the board to consider, and if so, if you want to handle it on a board level or ask the RVT, or I'm sorry, the MDC to look into this further.
Thank you, Jessica. And I know the MDC has the RVT job tasks as one of their items that they've been working on as well. This does make sense, in my opinion, to be sent to the MDC to do a little bit more research on it and take input from stakeholders, et cetera, and then bring something back to the board, in my opinion. And I understand this was brought up at the last meeting, I think in public comment, Rebecca Carvda, and obviously it's of interest and importance to some people, and these days maybe more important than ever. So with that, I'll see what other folks have to say. Dr. Nolan.
I just have a quick question because on page 2, it talks about the RVT being able to independently administer, things such as sub-Q fluids without veterinary supervision. Does that mean without any, like no indirect supervision, no, in other words, if they do something wrong that puts that pet at risk, then is the veterinarian that prescribes the medication still responsible, or is the RVT now solely responsible? It seems to me that makes that's a pretty big, that's a difference than what we have right now, which is the veterinarian remains responsible, whether it's indirect or direct. Does that make sense to anybody, that question?
Jessica or Mark or Jessica?
Yeah, it does make sense because if I remember from the last board meeting, the ability of the RVT to charge for their services was a big impetus for this change. So in other words, a client may need help giving insulin or sub-Q fluids, and an RVT would like to be able to perform those services and charge for them, even if they don't directly work for the veterinarian that has put the pet on those medicines. So if I prescribe sub-Q fluids for one of my patients and one of my RVTs goes to their house to do the services, I would view that as indirect supervision. She's helping carry out my orders, but indirectly. But what the RVT wanted to be able to do from last meeting is that the owner can call this RVT who doesn't necessarily work for me and do those services and charge for it. I believe that that's what the intention of it. So once again, Dr. Nolan raised a good point. Does the liability go towards it's the owner that made the decision to hire this person to do it? So I wouldn't think that the veterinarian would be liable for it because it's the owner who went out and hired the RVT to do it. I think I'm in support of it because the pandemic has taught us that we do have to start to utilize more members of our team because veterinarians can't do everything anymore because it's just too much. So we definitely need RVTs to be able to do this, but I hadn't thought of the liability issue, and I don't think it should fall back on the veterinarian if they're hiring somebody to do it.
I think, for instance, you use the example of an insulin injection. If the RX that you wrote as the veterinarian, said 5, IUs of insulin subcutaneously, and then the RVTA accidentally gave 50 or something, then it seems like the liability should be on the person administering that if they're getting paid to do that, not the veterinarian who wrote a correct prescription. Is that what we're saying? I think it's a great step in the right direction. I just think RVTs need to be aware that they've been pretty used to the umbrella being, over them when it comes to practice. So I think that's something we should at least just, mention, it seems to me.
Well, with great power comes great responsibilities. And I think they're very capable and realize that.
And I think a lot of that would come up during the MDC discussions as well. Tara, I know Dr. Bradbury, but I want to bring Tara in if she's got something important here. You're muted.
Can you guys hear her? Because I'm not hearing anything. I just don't know if it's my internet. Okay.
No.
She might be double muted, so she was unmuted on the computer, but she might have accidentally muted herself on her phone too. So she can try *6.
We heard a click. Maybe. No.
I hope I'm never double muted.
I don't think you could be double muted, actually, Mark. Okay, Tara.
Click the pull down menu next to the speaker. There's audio options there. That's how I fixed mine.
Did Christina have something to say why Tara works on it, or?
It's a good point, I think. Unless.
Sure. And maybe Tara, you just chime in, just say hello when you think you've got it, and we'll wait. I think we should send this to the MDC and add that to the RVT duty kind of umbrella. I was surprised. It made me think again about, consumer protection and how RVTs, if they're not allowed to do this, which they're not, as like a pet sitter type of a situation, but other people that aren't licensed are instead doing it. I don't know that that's helpful to the consumer, but I think we could. If we're looking at this, it would be able to make it clear that, under those auspices, it would be the RVT that's in, their license would be on the line should they make some mistake, not the veterinarian that prescribed the medication that is not related to the RVT. So I think that this is something that would also help with access to care. I know, like, taking an animal in for subcutaneous fluids is time consuming. You need transportation, you need a lot of money. They charge a lot of money versus having someone come to the house and help with those things. So I think that this is kind of related to that as well.
Oops.
So Tara's going to try to log out and log back in, but in the meantime, she just wanted to state that it's going to be important to figure out the circumstances under which RVTs can administer or provide these services. And is it when consumers order meds online and there's no California vet supervising the treatment, or is it pet sitting, etc.? Or it's just something to consider in the discussion.
Thank you. That was, this is Kathy, and when we heard this last time and there was some brief discussion about, that was what I was wondering about. What were the circumstances? Was it a veterinarian prescribed sub-Q fluids, and for some reason I, as a client, am unable to do it at home or going out of town, and I want to retain an RVT to come to my home to do it, and that RVT is going to get paid. And so, meanwhile, so that the vet prescribed the medication, the RVT is coming to administer it, or whether an RVT was bringing medication, which I assume they would not be. But I agree. I think there's a lot of questions about this, and obviously the liability, in many cases would be on the RVT. I would assume, but again, it has to be talked through at MDC. So seems like an interesting subject, but it does have a lot of the different caveats that we'd have to look through. Let me see. Oh, I still not see Kara. Christina, your hand is up still. Oh, it's not really? Okay. All right. Well, do we have a motion on this presentation? I mean, even to direct MDC to research or something. We have an action requested on our materials. And I can make a motion if people are interested, or if everybody's, okay.
I can do it, Kathy, if you'd like.
Thank you. Okay, that's great. Thanks.
So I would like to motion that that CCR Title 16, Section 2036 be reevaluated by the MDC to allow RVTs to perform additional animal health care tasks without veterinary supervision, and direct the MDC to research, discuss with stakeholders, and bring recommendations back to the board at a future meeting.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any more discussion? He is seeing none. I think now we should go to public comment.
All right. This is the moderator, and I have opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment on this agenda item 10C, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. And we do have some requests for comment. The first is from Nancy Ehrlich. So Nancy, I'll let you know when you can unmute yourself. And Nancy, you should be able to unmute yourself. There you go.
Hello. As you probably remember, we brought this to you because we were contacted by an RVT who was actually doing this, and she wanted to know if it was legal. And I advised her that I thought that she needed to be under the supervision of the veterinarian who prescribed the treatment in order for it to be legal. But that, of course, is not really practical if you have 10 different clients to be asking 10 different veterinarians if they're willing to supervise you when they don't know who you are. And when you think about the fact that the law currently allows anyone, and that means your neighbor or your child or anybody, to assist you if they do it for free, it seems illogical not to allow an RVT who's certainly qualified to administer a treatment that a client is qualified to administer, to not allow an RVT to do it. And of course, the RVT needs to be paid in order for this to be workable. So I think for me, it's really a great idea, and it helps with the situation we have right now with access to care. So I think it's a really good thing. It's not going to cause, should not cause any problems. Obviously, the RVT would need to obtain their own liability insurance. And I have contacted the insurance companies, and they are willing to offer, and they already do offer liability insurance to RVTs. So that's not an obstacle. So I would think that this is really a no-brainer.
All right, the next request for comment is from Anita Levy-Hudson. And Anita, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Wonderful, thank you. I echoing again Nancy's sentiments. I also wanted to add, in addition to what she stated, that this is really a situation where, to use a funny phrase, I guess, that the horse is out of the barn. Like, this is a thing that happens and has happened for so many years. There's always clients that, have cats that need fluids or can't pill their animal or need care, some sort of medical treatment at home. Many hospitals I've worked at, some have fully supported this idea of technicians going, not affiliated with the hospital, to assumedly absolve their liability, sometimes with the knowledge of the hospital and the support of the hospital. But this kind of home care is a common thing, and honestly for many of us, it's a huge supplement to our income because the pay scale is what it is. And it's easy money to stop by somebody's house on the way home and pill a cat, for $35, $40. Whether or not the medication, whether or not that have that relationship with that veterinarian, and it really falls onto that client as well to be giving you the correct information. Like, this is their pet, this is their property, and I think it's safe, maybe not safe, I think it's reasonable to assume that they are going to have some sort of information about that medication and the instructions of that medication. Liability insurance would certainly protect the RVT, but I mean, I do feel like there should be some responsibility placed on the owner too, as well, if they're asking for that kind of care for their pet from someone that they don't even know, right? Most of the public doesn't even know the difference between an RVT and an assistant. So that's step one, right? They may not even know who they're asking. How do they know that they're knowledgeable? So there's a lot of questions that go along with this. But it is something that is very frequently practiced. And I just want to make sure that you guys are aware. And I cannot even express the level in which this happens all the time. So when we're going forward, I just want you guys to keep that in mind. Thank you.
All right, and that is the last comment for or request for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so we have the motion on the floor to basically, what do you call it? I was going to say punt, but I'm thinking about the 49ers and our games coming up. Sorry. Anyway, move this to the MDC. And if there's no further discussion, I think we could have a roll call.
Dr. Bradbury?
Sorry.
Oh,
sorry.
Sorry.
Spoke too soon. Dr.
I just one really quick point. You know, the reality is it's true that everyone's already doing this, anyways. But if it was made clear by the board, it might help marketing the RVD if that is a part of their income, their revenue stream. There certainly is a population of clients that will seek out qualified people to give their kids medicines. So I think it would help the RVTs economically, marketed wise. That would be a positive thing.
All right. Okay. All right, Jessica, now I think you can call the roll.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Noland?
Yes.
Dr. Nunez?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Dr. Solicito?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler?
Yes.
Motion carries. All right. So for the next agenda item and the last one for the day, I think it's just going to be beneficial if I share my screen so I can go through the proposed amendments that we think should be recommended to the AAVSB bylaws committee. And so let me share my screen. All right. Are you guys able to see my screen? Okay. So the first one, members, just to quickly introduce this item, the AAVSB every year does a call for proposal recommendations for bylaw amendments, and the board, part of the board's strategic plan is to collaborate more with the AAVSB and other national organizations to better provide a more balanced information presentations to the member boards after having some concerns over the last few conferences that the AAVSB has put on, and also has been unable to participate in some of the annual conferences due to the states that they're located in. And so based on the board strategic plan objective and the concern that we're not able to participate in 18 states, when those meetings are within those states, we're not able to participate in person, we are proposing these amendments. So I'm just going to go through them one by one. The first one's pretty I think these are all pretty self-explanatory, but the first one is to include veterinary technicians, since we recently approved the legislative proposal that was in our sunset bill to also accept the 4 trained veterinary technicians, and the PAVE program was recently launched for the veterinary technicians, so this is just allowing that. So it's a minor change for the PAVE RVT program. I'll scroll down to the next one. I'm hoping to get both of these in the same one. So this is the first, well, actually I made 2 changes to this, 2 sentences added. The first one is to add the possibility for virtually, for to make it into the bylaws that all conferences are going to be held in person and virtually, to allow for those states who aren't able to travel to still participate in the meetings. Like I said, California right now can't travel to 18 states because of the travel restriction. And other times, like for COVID, for example, there were a lot of boards who were also unable to travel in person to the annual meeting this last year. And so AAVSB provided the opportunity for them to do it, participate virtually. And so now that we know that it can happen, we think that this should be a priority of AAVSB, and to make sure that it's in the bylaws that there is always the ability to participate virtually for member boards. The other sentence that we added is that all continuing education provided during the annual delegate assembly meetings shall comply with the current AAVSB race standards. This one, we think that it should be added to address some of the concerns about the specific topics that were provided in some of the conferences. Some of them seemed to have clear conflicts, and they weren't disclosed in the beginning, and also seem to be primarily for pushing sales of a product. And we just feel that in order to make sure that they abide by the same standards that they hold all the other continuing education, that we just add this requirement in there to the bylaws to make sure that the continuing education provided is going to follow the same standards. The next one we have is just minor to clarify that the participants for the delegates, that could be both in person or virtually. And then put down. I apologize if this is making anybody nauseous. This one, we felt that this was also helpful because the conference committee itself is already providing input on the locations of the meeting. They make recommendations within the budget established, provide input regarding the topics, speakers, and overall program. They also provide feedback on the annual conference. So we feel that this should be just an additional thing, that when the conference committee does look at this and provide feedback, they should also consider the information. So I'll just read what I added. The conference committee, with the assistance of AAVSB staff and leadership, shall take all reasonable steps necessary to ensure information provided during the annual conference complies with all AAVSB established standards and provides balanced information that supports and advances the regulatory process and assists member boards in fulfilling their consumer protection missions. This last sentence here is actually, this part supports and advances the regulatory processes. That is the mission of the AAVSB. And then this part is also helping with our consumer protection mission as well. And so we feel like this shouldn't be a really controversial request. We're just asking that it's solidified in the bylaws, that this is one of the things that the conference committee uses when they provide the input back to AAVSB. And this is to help, like I said, with the balance of the information that the boards are provided. Sometimes they've been seemingly one-sided from one side of a pretty controversial issues. And we feel it's important, especially as regulatory agencies, to weigh all of the information and all perspectives before making any decisions. So that's our recommendation for the conference committee. And then we're also recommending that the Executive Director's Advisory Committee is no longer considered an ad hoc committee. I think that this is a really valuable committee for executive directors to meet regularly frontline state boards to help identify any trends or concerns that they're finding, identify best practices, and serve as a good resource to the AAVSB. This has been an ad hoc committee from the AAVSB since 2016. All of the information provided here is what is already being done in the committee. Unfortunately, over the last couple of years, the committee has not been given a high priority by the AAVSB and hasn't been meeting. And so we feel that if we put it into the bylaws that it becomes a standing committee, then they will be meeting more often and will be able to share more information and work faster when it comes to identifying trends or best practices. I believe that is it. If members have any questions or want to propose any additional changes, now's the time.
Thank you, Jessica. And I think for background also, I know at least Jamie and Mark and Christina and I on the current board have been to several conferences, and prior to that, Cheryl, I think, oh, and Dick Sullivan, who's actually not on the board, but MDC. So I think this is something we've talked about in the past, and I think these bylaws are careful. These amendments are carefully written to not criticize, but just to reiterate the mission of the AAVSB in terms of and help hopefully clarify some things. And I on the executive director subcommittee, that committee, Jessica is working with a number of other state officers, state EOs as well. And I think this is not just an opinion from California. The other EOs would like to see this committee made a more formal committee as opposed to an ad hoc as well. Does anyone have, Mark?
I mean, these just make sense that we should be able to attend virtually because there's 18 states that we have travel bans to go to, and if California is shut out, then major decisions that affect us could be made, and that's not a good thing. It's almost ridiculous that the organization that oversees regulatory body doesn't have a race requirement for their CE that they provide. It just seems almost intuitive that that should be in their bylaws. And you know, so many of a lot of the presentations have been pretty much infomercials. At the last meeting, there was a presenter that was advocating telemedicine that actually told a tale of our regulatory process that was completely not true. So not only was it unbalanced information, it was wrong information. So that needs to be fixed.
And I will say that, one thing, Jessica, on page 1, there's a slight typo at the very bottom where we have band as B-A-N-D versus B-A-N-N-E-D. So we are traveling band, but the band is different. And likewise, just to bring this up, next year or this year coming up, the next conference is in a state where we will not be able to attend again. So in the last 5 years, that's 2 states.
So actually, that was something else I was going to mention. These bylaw proposals are going to be voted on at a meeting that we're not going to be able to attend.
True, except that they may have a virtual option on the net just because of COVID.
Yeah, but they're not required to because it's not in the bylaws.
That is so true.
And we're not coming because of COVID restrictions.
Well, and the state it's in. Dr. Nolan.
I really want to compliment Jessica and her team. I think these are all really great additions to the bylaws. And I was going to ask Jessica if you have several other executive officers that do agree with these, if it might be more powerful to introduce them together as a team instead of just as an individual state. You know, if you could, but I don't know if that's possible or not, but it might give it even more strength. And I guess the only downside to the virtual, Mark, is we won't get our Care Bear next time.
So that was my original intent, was to be able to meet with the other executive directors before this meeting, so we can propose these, because they are due next month on the 18th. So it gives us a short time frame, but unfortunately due to COVID, we had to do some rearranging of meetings, and I was only able to meet with the Kentucky EO, who do seem to support the requests that we're making. But I don't know about the reality of us being able to do a joint letter, although that was the intent. But if the bylaws committee does take this up, that's something that I feel, after whatever happens with this board, if the board does approve these amendments, I do plan on sharing them with the rest of the executive directors, and I hopefully get their support in that as well. I just don't know if I can make it before the deadline to submit to the bylaws committee.
Great, makes sense.
And Jessica, one other option is in your discussions with these other EOs, depending on when their boards meet, if similar EO, if other states propose the same bylaw amendments, rather than doing it all at one time, they're still getting through, and it's being shown that there's, the same amendments are being proposed by multiple jurisdictions, which I think is very strong and important too. Anyone else have anything? So do we have a motion to adopt this proposed?
So moved. Motion to adopt.
Is there a
Dr.
second?
Nunez, would you mind just reading it from the action requested on page 3, just so we have it for the record what the motion is?
Motion to adopt the proposed amendments to the AAV-SB bylaws and direct the executive officer to provide the amendments to the AAV-SB's bylaws and resolution committee no later than February 18th, 2022.
And I'll second. Any other discussion? See, all right. So moderator, could you open this one up to public comment, please?
Thank you, Madam President. The Q&A panel is now available, and if any member of the public would like to comment on agenda item 11, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We do have a request for comment from Grant Miller, and Grant, I'll let you know when you can unmute yourself. All right, Grant, there you go, you're unmuted.
Thank you. I wanted to just express thanks on behalf of the profession to all of you who participate in the lunacy at the AAVSB. I don't know what is going on at that association, but it's deeply disturbing. And I'm very glad that Mark and Jessica and the rest of you are there trying to represent some semblance of, I don't even know what to call it. I would like the opportunity for the CVMA to be able to make comments to them about what they're doing there and their policies, but they're really not that kind of an organization. And so we rely on you to do that. And you are doing a very good job of it, and we're very grateful for that. So thank you very much. These amendments seem reasonable to me from just going through them and looking at them. And I really hope the AAVSB considers them and adopts them, because it's really fair and balanced to have these changes. Thank you.
All right, I see no further requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, sorry.
Sure. It's closed.
Thank you. And thank you, Grant, for those. When California goes, we try to have a big impression and impact. And Mark is on a committee, I'm on a committee, Jessica's on a committee, and up to recently, Jennifer had been on one of those committees. So anyway, we try to have our say whenever we can be there. And this virtual option will allow us, hopefully, if passed, to be there always. So,
And we're usually the best dressed.
and the most fun, obviously.
And the most fun, yes.
Anyway, back to if any other discussion by anybody on this subject. And thank you, Jessica, for working on these bylaw amendments. I know they're a pain dealing with bylaws. So, all right, I think we're ready for roll call.
All right, Dr. Bradbury,
Yes.
Ms. Laredo,
Yes.
Dr. Nolan,
Yes.
Dr. Nunez,
AAVSB Bear says, let's do this.
is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Prada,
Yes.
Dr. Solocito,
Yes.
Ms. Bowler.
Yes, thank you.
Motion carries.
I think that then brings us to the end of today's meeting. Again, I have a giant Maine Coon cat in the way and I cannot see you guys. There we go. Give it off. I think it brings us to the end of the meeting and would like to, I don't know that I need a motion to recess to tomorrow at 9. Oh, wait, I see a hand up. Dr. Noland?
I just wanted to give you a round of applause for doing a great job on your first day and to really compliment your professionalism and how you handled it. So there you go.
Well, thank you. I'll get the hang of it. Give me like 10, 12 more meetings like this. Just kidding. Anyway, well, thank you, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.